scene. Let me render first and see what we have. So let's keep this because I might go back to something similar like this. I want to keep the rendering. So you guys, when you render, just keep the renders because you can always save them better. Because if Maya crashes, you lose all that memory. You know, so you can save the image. I'm not going to save the images now, but I'm going to keep them in the memory here and render this. So there's nothing there. We're using mental ray. There's no light. Let me just add only the mental ray node and let's see how that affects the space. But before I do that, obviously everything has Lambert 1. I'm going to change some of the materials. So I'm going to go and make these reflective, chrome. I'm going to use a chrome material. One thing I wanted to say is that I will go and talk about materials next week, like more in more detail. Now I'm just doing more of a general, theoretical way of using like a lot of things at the same time, like setting lights and putting materials. So now we're going to use like mental ray materials. We haven't used that before. So if you want to review what you have in your scene, you just go and open your Hypershade, and you can see we don't have anything here. You can go and say, I don't want any Maya materials, I want a mental ray material. Those are way more sophisticated, more photorealistic. They work with mental ray really well. They never work with Maya software. If you have a mental ray material, it will never show in a Maya software render. It will be the object will render invisible. So if you're using Maya software and you're using, let's say, Maya material X, it won't show up. But everything else works in, like all the Maya materials work in mental ray. So if you have like Lambert, Blinn, or Phong, you can see here we have all these Maya materials. They work anywhere, but mental ray materials only work with mental ray rendering. So I'm going to use the Maya material X. It's called the architectural material, and it's really good because it has a lot of presets. We can make a way better more photorealistic glass, or like material like skin that you can see through, or all these things, or wax. So we can make a lot of interesting materials with this one. So this is kind of like a Swiss knife of the material. Like you can use it for anything you want. That's how they call it. It's more like that. So I made this. See, I have it here, and I need to name it. So I'm gonna say this will be Chrome 01, and I'll select that. I can select this with the middle mouse button and throw it on this guy here, or I can select all these. It's better to select all these objects, not this one. 1, 2, 3, and right click, assign material to selection. So now all these guys they kind of share the same material. This material again is the Maya material X. It's a mental ray material, and let's see how we can manipulate it. If we press Ctrl A, we go to the attribute editor. So these guys are all polygon shapes, and they have settings here. So if I go all the way, if you want to review their material, you gotta go all the way to the right, and the last tab will be the material. So obviously I just added the Chrome 1 to all of these, but that doesn't look like any Chrome yet. What I could do, and to bypass all that, I can go and say, well, preset, make a Chrome material right now. Replace that and make a Chrome. Don't worry about this happening here because it's hard to visualize those textures or those materials in here. Even in Viewports 2.0, we're gonna get you're not gonna see a Chrome finish here. So let's go back and let's add a material to this guy, then on the floor, and then I'm gonna put like a general light. So for this one, let's see another way to add a material. I can go and say assign new material. So then I have a quick list: mental ray, Maya material X. So this will be the seats or something. and I can use a, let's see, like more of a, I'll do like some um, glossy finish, but not too much, like 50%. And I'm gonna change the color to like something else. So let's do that, and then let's get the floor, and I'm gonna add like a very like a blurry kind of reflected material. So I'm just gonna select that and do another assign new material. I'm using the MIA material X for everything for now. This is gonna be the floor, and I'm gonna do like glossy finish. But here's I'm gonna do a little bit of a I'm gonna manipulate that, so I'm gonna make it more like a gray. Something like that. And now you can see it here, and there's this color, there's weight. So the weight is how much diffuse, how much you know, if the material is like it diffuses the light. So if the less weight, the more absorbent it was gonna, you know, be. The roughness, notice here this like little you know, highlight. If I go and increase the roughness, I'm like actually making the highlight is there, but you can't really see it here, but it's actually there's like a general light around the highlight, and the roughness kind of kills it, and it becomes more powder, like more like of a powder or rubber material. So if you wanted to simulate rubber, you would go and make it very rough, like 0.9, and then you would kill the reflection. So the reflection here, you would just make it all the glossiness. Sorry. So you would kind of like see how you can actually make it more. So I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna make it, you know, maybe 0.6. So I have like this very blurry reflection for the floor. And now I don't have any lights, so I'm only gonna use a sphere. So I'm gonna go and create an environment the same I did in the previous video. Create an image-based light, but now I'm going to use an HDR, high dynamic range image, which I don't know how to make. I just find them online or I get them from libraries. But there is a way. There's like a software you can actually make your own HDR by shooting, like you can go and shoot your you know, your like room in your apartment, and you can compile it and make an HDR image, so it will show in the reflections of your CG. You know, so if you wanted to make for a person believe that you know, like some sort of glossy coffee cup is inside your room, you would use your room space, you would photograph it with like a particular technique, and then you would use that HDR in Maya, and you would see the reflections of your own room inside that cup. So that's how they would simulate the environment. So that's how they would do that, you know. And we'll talk about HDR. I just don't know the techniques of how they make it.
Is it just a JPEG image?
It's no, it's not a, it's not that color space. It's like a more dynamic range. So it's like has more. It's like a 32-bit image with like, you know, a lot of other information in it, which we're gonna see. Like I can show a little bit another time when we're using like that. So image name, I'm gonna bring that here, and let's see. I have. So this is a .hdr file. So now what happened is, if I move away, this thing, I need to make the camera. So this is what so that's the HDR. This is a photographed space of a downtown, you know, of a rooftop, and it's wrapped around this sphere. Now, this is like a pretty big sphere. I can scale it. We have a problem with the scale now. Our scale is, we made a miniature object. We have to from now on we have to think about measurements, because if we're working with like real photorealistic scenes, we have to make sure that all our scenes are going to be measured in a correct way. So let's go back to our chair here, which is tiny, and frame it. So I'm going to frame it and also go and create a bookmark. Remember, the bookmarks are these, like, this is a bookmark, so I'm going to create a bookmark quickly from here. So let's render that. That's what we had before.
Is that the bookmark like icon new, or was that in the previous one?
Sorry, what?
Was the bookmark icon new?
Yeah, it was there. It was there. So notice immediately that the sphere is actually a light source. So I haven't used any lights yet. I'm using, so notice how the reflections are exactly what, it's catching the reflections from the HDR image. It's already looking really good, only from that. You know, we're working with this. You can see the reflections. Now I can move the camera a little bit, like that. Let's see, and maybe it will catch more of the reflections. So let's actually select that and keep that image. Do another one. Thing is, I made this more of a blurry plastic. Not so much. So you can see like some of the reflections, especially on the chrome. You can see the sky, see all that. So I wanted you guys to see that, and that's what's happening here. So let's go back to our bookmark. Again, the bookmarks. This is going to be one. So the bookmarks, you can actually, there's an icon. You can click on that one, or you can go and say create. Go to the bookmarks and say edit bookmarks. You can create your own here and right, or edit these and make a better name, or that's the edit. So for now, what we have is, for this render, we're using an image-based lighting, an HDR image, and we haven't been using Final Gather yet, so let's put Final Gather. So now, let's look at the difference. So we're only looking at reflections now. So the previous one was this one. Okay, so we have that. Let's render a new one. Now it's calculating even more precise light that is actually bouncing everywhere. Before it was more like the reflections only, or getting the reflections, but now it's actually calculating that becomes more of a light source. So it takes much longer to render. So I'm gonna go ahead and also work on this guy, add some materials on this guy, and then start adding some lights. What I want to do is I want to simulate a daylight. So I'm gonna use a directional light as my source, because there's no shadow now. Notice that it's almost like you're in this, very, very soft studio space. There's all filtered almost. So this takes 53 seconds, but that's a full, it's a 1280, it's half HD. So this is what we have. We have a problem with the resolution. You notice that there's a lot of grain around, all that. That's a problem.
Is that a grain or the material itself?
Well, this material that I used is an MI Material X for the ground, and we called it ground material. Let's look at it. So if we go to the ground material, the floor material I actually mentioned. Notice that the glossiness, I dropped it down to 0.3, so I made a blurry glossiness, but the glossy samples are very low. That's the thing that you have to increase to kill the grain. But I'm not going to do it now because it's going to take I don't want to increase my render times. I want to refine everything at the end. So I'm already increasing the render times, but I'm doing that for demonstration reasons and just want to show you guys all that stuff. So before I do anything, I'm going to go back to my bookmarks, camera view 2, and I'm going to add a directional light. So basically, let me do something quick here. Let me see if that actually. I forgot that there's a default light on. I'm gonna see. If I go back to my render, and now I'm gonna start rendering like really low, so 25. I'm gonna do like 50%, and keep this image and render. So well, we have final gather, so it's actually. So notice that it got darker, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Under the character.
Yeah. I forgot that was on. It's always on. So here's what it's happening. So let me explain this. So now, see how the default light is a Maya light. That when we don't have any lights, this takes over, and it's a general light. So I'm gonna go back some steps so you guys can understand what happened. So I closed that. I turned this off by going to the first tab, and I said don't use the default light. And I'm also going to turn off the final gather for a little bit, just so we can see what happens. If I turn off the final gather, off. Let's go back. I'm going back some steps so we can see without any light, without any final gather. So I'm going to keep this and do another render. So what we have now is only the reflections from the sphere. So that's the only generated, almost, these would be only the reflections. So there's no light, it's only the reflections. So you can see this difference between this frame with the final gather. So what the final gather does is it uses the sphere as a light source. So it actually starts generating energy from it. So I'm going to go back, and the only thing I'm going to do now is just introduce the final gather again. So I'm going to go to my sampling and put the final gather on, close that. Now we have IBL and final gather only. And the next thing we're going to do is add a sunlight. So I'm going to stop the video here.